Premier, thank you for inviting me into your office.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
As you know, some people loyal to you this week tried to delay next year's leadership convention. Why would you want to delay being reviewed next year?
I'm ready for the review in February. That would be my response. I'm ready for this. This is something that we knew was coming. This is part of a very progressive constitution that only the Liberal Party in Newfoundland and Labrador would have. I've been through 2 reviews already, been through 2 elections, and had a very extensive leadership challenge in 2013 when we was widely contested and came out of that. So I'm not afraid of reviews, or not afraid at all to take on the challenge.
Why would people loyal to you, such as the President, John Allen and Rodney Mercer, why would they have a motion to move it?
I wasn't at that table.
Right.
They make decisions, but certainly not on my request at all. I'm ready to go for a leadership challenge at any point. It's part of our Constitution, and I am proud of our Constitution. If someone told me that we're going to do this in February, March, or April, whenever it is, I've been ready in the past, and I'll be ready, for the next one.
So you'd be okay to have one in February?
I'm ready to have one this weekend if they wanted to. I'm not afraid of challenges, Anthony. I've taken, my career in politics. Like I said, I came on leader of this party nearly 8 years ago. In a few weeks, it'll be leader of this party for 8 years. I've been through 2 elections. I've been through 2 leadership challenges, and I won a province-wide leadership campaign that had 5 people contesting that. So, not afraid of challenges.
Let's talk about some of the challenges that you're not afraid of. This past session, as you know, you had some cabinet difficulties. Perry Tripper had to quit for a racially charged phone call. Jerry Byrne had to apologize to the House after making some interesting accusations pertaining to racism. And most recently, Christopher Mitchellmore, he had to apologize for his role in hiring Carla Foot. Why has it been so difficult for you as Premier to actually control the political agenda?
We are controlling the political agenda. We put in 13 pieces of legislation this fall session. Many of them impact Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. That didn't get broad coverage. That went through the House of Assembly with support from opposition parties. So the legislative agenda that's getting through, I think if you speak to the cabinet members and MHAs in general, they would have been disappointed with some of the remarks that they made themselves. That's been obvious. But one of the things that did not get reported is that we're seeing the same thing from opposition parties as well. We've had lots of new opposition members, MHAs, would have had to retract many statements that's been made that were not parliamentary comments in this session as well. So minority government, as there is an adjustment, there's no question about that. But we've been disappointed. I've said that publicly. So have my members, so have my ministers. We got to do better, and we will.
Now, I want to talk to you about some of the issues that were not talked about because of everything that was going on in the House this session, such as finances, education, rate mitigation. But ethics and leadership is very important for public confidence in our institutions. And I want to ask you a couple of pointy questions. When you told me and other reporters that you never directed anybody to hire Carla Foot, is that because it was you yourself who offered her the job?
No, I didn't direct Carla Foot. It wasn't a suggestion that would have come from me here in this office. People make decisions and people move around government all the time. It's part of professional development. It's part of succession planning. This was not a direction that came from me, and I didn't ask anybody, didn't suggest anybody to go around processes. What's been reviewed here has been a long-standing process that has been around government for many, many years. That was reviewed for the first time in the history of this province by whistleblower legislation. That is what happened here. And so when this review came in, there was a number of recommendations. There was a reprimand. The minister apologized. But I would say that if you go back in history, you would find many, many ministers would have used the same kind of hiring processes that would have been used in this particular case, and the recommendations of the reprimand would have been the same.
When you say that, do you mean conservatives hire their friends, liberals hire their friends? I want to make sure that just because other people have done it doesn't make it right.
No, and that's my point here. That is not right, and that is the reason why I accept the responsibility to fix this. Just like I fixed many other problems in this province, I did it with the Independent Appointments Commission. We're doing it with Muskrat Falls. I'm going to fix this. I take the responsibility from this report as Premier to fix what happened here. We had to find a way to appropriately move people around government. It's good for succession planning. We have many deputy ministers in our government right now that have come up through a succession planning that we've been able to do. This report has identified some changes and improvements that will need to be made. As Premier of the province, I accept that responsibility, and I will fix it.
You mentioned whistleblower and this report, the Mitchell-Moore report by the Citizens Representative, and it says, and this is a quotation, all right, I think it's page 8, quote, the executive committee felt that there was little they could do, this is the executive committee of the rooms, that they could do given that the Premier had made the offer to Ms. Foot. So do you think people watching us right now believe that you, Dwight Ball, had nothing to do with Carla Foot getting that job? You believe that?
Well, if you look at the CEO and the submission that he made, that didn't come from him. Didn't speak to the CEO, didn't speak to the board about any of this. These were comments that were made, not from me, not from any meeting that would have occurred for me. I did not direct anyone to put Carla Foot into the rooms. Did not suggest that anyone should go around long-standing processes for that to happen. Matter of fact, the review is back, the report is back. My responsibility now is to fix it, and fix it I will.
So who offered Carla Foot the job?
That would have been people move around government, would have been done through Cabinet Secretariat. That direction did not come from me. That job was not directed from me. Neither was the processes. That processes have been around, hiring processes, for quite some time.
It's almost as though either you or the leadership expect people to believe that Christopher Mitchell-Moore woke up one morning and said, you know what? I think I'm going to move Carla Foot to the rooms with no documentation, no job interview, and he just came up with this on his own. I mean, how did this happen?
Well, when you look at it, there was a couple of people that were hired at the rooms around the same time without a job interview. Right now, we're talking about Carla Foot. The report is back. I'm going to fix this, Anthony.
Okay.
It needs to be fixed, no different than I would have done with the Independent Appointments Commission. A few years ago, if you were a friend, the Tories did a great job at this. If you were a friend, you got a key appointment. I've changed that in 2016. 2,600 people have went through a merit-based process through the Independent Appointments Commission. Over 600 people are in positions now that many of them thought they would never have had. More women have gone through the merit-based process through the Independent Appointments Commission, and leading key agencies within our government as a result of the changes that I put in place in 2016, and I will make the same necessary changes that will fix the way executives and managers are moved around government.
Now that same report, which condemned Mr. Mitchell-Moore for gross misconduct, when we asked you about that, you said he was staying in your cabinet because he was a young, hard-working minister, and I think everybody, despite his selfies and his quirkiness, everyone recognizes he's a hard-working minister. However, you called him a loyal soldier, right? You're the general. Wasn't he just following your orders?
I am so glad you brought that up, because I didn't call him a loyal soldier because he followed my orders. No, I did not. The context that I said that in was this was a young minister that sat through 2 or 3 days in the House of Assembly when his name was virtually on every sentence. It was on the public airways every day. He had a lot of support in his district. He did not take direction from me at all. The context of calling him a loyal soldier was not that. He's been working extremely hard. He's worked hard for his district. He's been a hard-working minister. That was the context that I made that comment in, not the context that he took a direction from a general. That was not the case.
All right. We're going to move on to some other issues, but one last question, and again, we're coming back to your leadership right now. As we're doing this interview, are you aware that there are people who want your job who have been contacting cabinet ministers and members of your caucus this week asking them to support them once you fail in a leadership review? Do you know what's going on behind the scenes?
Listen, there will always be people, and I'm excited, encouraged by the fact that people want to be Premier of this province. People should have aspirations for leadership. That is what this is all about. I support that kind of culture in our province. It's important. I sit here as Premier with a privilege, and I take that.
Right.
I take that privilege.
You're being very diplomatic.
Not as a right.
You're being very
but
diplomatic.
Right now, this is a very strong party. I have a lot of support within this party.
Well,
matter of fact, on the national scene, I would say, Anthony, that we, as Newfoundland and Labrador, are in a position like we haven't been in a long, long time. And the relationship with my colleagues at the national level of all political parties, they could be Conservative, they could be NDP,
with all due respect,
very, very strong.
With all due respect, Premier, political parties and governments rely on loyalty. And if people are actively calling your cabinet ministers and members of caucus saying, look, it's time to make a decision, who are you going to line up behind? That's not an issue of succession planning, right? That's an issue of undermining your leadership. And you know this is going on, and I would suggest to you that the decision not to fire Christopher Mitchellmore is the tipping point.
No.
That is what has emboldened people to go after your job.
No, not at all. What's happening is that if there's people out there with political aspirations, well, at some point they'll put their name on a ballot and they will run in an election just like I've done.
Right.
They'll put their name on a ballot and they'll face Liberals and they'll face the population of Newfoundland and Labrador. That I encourage. We always look, I've always agreed that it's important if it's at the cabinet table, at the caucus table, it could be at a town council. Always challenge yourself. If we want to become stronger leaders, if we want to become better leaders to make better decisions, challenge function is always good for that to happen. And that's the environment that I continue to encourage.
Let me put it this way before we move on. Mr. Tripper had to quit. Mr. Joyce had to quit. Mr. Kirby had to quit. But the person who you call the loyal soldier in that context that you clarified, Mr. Mitchellmore, he gets to stay. And I would suggest to you that within your caucus and your cabinet, there is profound disappointment about that. And I wonder if you can literally feel power slipping away.
No, I don't. Not at all. And I think that right now we have priority around rate mitigation, around electricity rates. These are all priorities for me as leader of this party. These are what people are asking me to deal with as well. The circumstances and the examples that you just gave were all completely different. And you know, Perry Tripp and I are still very good friends. I talk to Perry quite often. He's dealing with the situation that he found himself in. He's dealing with that. Minister Mitchellmore apologized. He accepted the reprimand. He got up publicly before when this came out and issued a statement around his apology. He sits in this cabinet today.
And you voted against.
As a member of this cabinet.
You voted against your party on that vote. Was that a whip vote?
Well, he didn't. No, it's not. It wasn't a whip vote.
Free vote.
It was a free vote, and as you remember, in the amendments that were made there, he voted for those amendments at that particular time. In the House that night, as we all know, it was a very. There was a lot of moving parts going on there.
But you turned around. You looked like you were really surprised when you voted the way you did.
It was not a whip vote, as I said, and he voted as he felt he should vote. And in this particular case here, the amendments that were put in place, he quickly got up and gave, I think, a very genuine apology to the people of this province and to members of the House of Assembly, just like he said he would do on day one.
Do you think you'll be sitting in that chair 1 year from now? I don't know if I'll be here, but do you think you'll be here?
You know, my job right now is to work for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians for the benefit. I want to sit in this chair as long as I'm making a difference for people in Newfoundland and Labrador. I have a lot of energy. I faced a lot of challenges. In my term as leader, as premier of this province, when I came into this job, we had oil at $27 a barrel. Revenue was slipping. We had a Muskrat Falls project that was out of control. We've been able to corral all of that and bring that back together. There's still a lot of challenges in this province. I've made a commitment to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to get electricity rates under control, that they would not double. I am working extremely hard with the federal government and others to make sure that that doesn't happen, and it will not happen. From the financial structure of the province, one of the unique things that we've been able to do in recent weeks is around fiscal stabilization program. That could have unique benefits for Newfoundland and Labrador. These things just doesn't happen. It takes relationship building with other provinces and with the federal government, and that's what I'm doing at the national level. Added to that, I will take on the chair in 2020 of the internal trade, and I'll also take on the chair as a chair for the Atlantic Premiers.
Okay.
So there's a lot on my plate right now, and I'm looking forward to 2020.
So you have no intention of resigning before the budget in March?
No, I'm thinking about getting a budget in March that will get through the House of Assembly. If the budget doesn't get through in the House of Assembly,
well, we all know what that means.
We'll take that to the people of the province, and I'd be more than willing to do that. We have made a significant changes. 3 years ago, people were saying that we couldn't build infrastructure in this province. Go into Corner Brook today. When the Tories announced it, never delivered it. The hospital is moving forward. The long-term care site will be open in February.
Right.
Go into Gander, go into Grand Falls, Windsor, go into Springdale. Their institutions and healthcare infrastructure is being upgraded. The replacement for the Waterford Hospital will happen. That is coming along. There's schools being built. The Trans-Labrador Highway, when people said we couldn't pave that, it's being paved. The mining industry in Lab West is coming back together. There's a lot of good things happening in this province. We put in place a plan. I faced a lot of challenges, and we're delivering for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
It's interesting you said that. So you're actually willing, if you can't get what you think is the right budget for the province through, you're willing to go to the polls. I mean, obviously parliamentary procedure means you have to if you get defeated, but that means you would not have to face a leadership review. We could just go to the polls.
I'm not at all about whatever the review is. If the opposition parties decided that they want an election based on our budget, we'll go to the people of this province. And instead of letting 40 people decide, we'll let some 500,000 people to decide on what the future is for Newfoundland and Labrador. I don't back down from challenges. As long as I'm making a difference, I'll be premier of this province.
Okay, let's move on to some policy. In fairness, I said we'd talk about some issues. Auditors General for about 8 years have been saying the government has a spending problem. Today, no different. Our net debt's a problem. Why haven't we been able to get spending under control? You actually recognized it when you came up with the way forward. You actually, I think you said, we have a spending problem. And in fairness, it's not just you, the Tories, that have a spending problem. Governments have spending problems. Why haven't we been able to get our solution to this?
Well, when you look at spending, you're looking at two major areas, would be healthcare, would be education and so on, some of those investments in infrastructure as well. So we have gotten our healthcare spending under control. This is not where you're seeing the big expenditure increases. If you listen to opposition parties right now, this is what's really unique about being a decision maker. So they come out and they ask for all kinds of new things every day of the week. If you sit through this house, we want this, that, and some other thing. Then on a day like today, they come out and said, oh, we got a spending problem. Well, there's only two ways to address that. Mm-hmm. You had to increase taxes through your revenue side, or you had to cut services. We have made a decision to try and strike a balance. And that's what we've been able to do, realizing that if you live in this province, if you're a senior, you need to be able to access those services. If you're a young family in this province, you need to be able to access services like childcare. You need good schools. So striking that balance is not always easy to do, realizing that we have a lot of potential here in the long term, and that's what we've been doing. Looking at the long term of this province, making the decisions that we need to make today, but making sure that we strike the balance of providing services and fair taxation.
You mentioned seniors. I want to share some anecdotal evidence with you. I was doing Christmas shopping. I was in a Walmart and I saw an older woman stacking cat food. Mm-hmm. And then I was in a Marie's and then there was a senior person behind the cash. And I figure these are people trying to sort of supplement their income. Mm-hmm. Now, when electricity rates go up, Dwight Ball can afford it. Anthony Germain can afford it. Not quite as much as Dwight Ball can afford it, but some of us can afford it, some of us can't. When we talk about rate mitigation, this grandiose term, when is that going to be something that I can actually go into a Marie's or a Walmart and say, hey, this is what rate mitigation means for you? Because when those power rates go up for those people who are just making ends meet, it's going to be trouble.
You talked about your examples of seeing people. Just yesterday, I told a story earlier, is that I met a young man who said his electricity bill was $452 just yesterday. And he said, I can't afford that to double. I said, it will not double. We are working now with the federal government and others on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. We have people in Ottawa today that's looking for the solution to this. The greatest potential that we have would be around restructuring of the financial instruments of Muskrat Falls. That takes quite a bit of work, because there's quite a few people involved in all of this. So we're looking near the end of January, the Public Utilities Board, which we brought back in as well, to review what options we have available. Right. So some of the advice will come from them. But keep in mind what we got into this. So when we get the opposition parties complain about this is a project of $12.7 billion that we're getting under control. The impact of this is from Muskrat Falls, that project. I put in place the inquiry. The inquiry will come back from recommendations.
And we'll get that report.
Got there?
Yeah.
That'll be before the end of March.
All right, so that's a big story to watch for in 2020. You mentioned Muskrat Falls, and I think one of my big head shake moments of 2019 was when Tom Osborne, your Minister of Finance, pointed out that as a province, our biggest expense is healthcare. Our second is interest payments on debt, and third is education. So we spend more making the payment on the credit card bill than we do on our schools. What's your assessment of how serious that is? Because I'm not sure if people watching understand what that means.
It is very serious. It is a serious situation, and one of the reasons why we've taken an approach to now we get Ottawa to support a new arrangement, a redefined fiscal stabilization program that could help provinces like us. But when you look back a few years ago, we were 30% dependent on oil. It's much less than that now, 13, 14%. But this debt servicing cost is extreme for Newfoundland and Labrador. No other province in this country would have that level of debt servicing.
Right.
And so we realize that, but doing this overnight, this comes with long-term planning. We've been 4 years into this, making a difference. It comes from bringing people in our province, through immigration, bringing investment. A few years ago, people said there'd be no exploration offshore Newfoundland and Labrador. Well, there's $4 billion ready to be spent on exploration.
Right.
Oil revenue is still extremely important, but so is finding the new industries that would be available using the potential that we have here.
Some concerns will be the usual sort of goodwill one would expect between a Liberal provincial government and federal government has grounds, but in this federal scenario with a minority that has got a situation in Quebec and a situation in the West, I think some observers fear that Prime Minister Trudeau's got other things to worry about that are much bigger than Newfoundland and Labrador's financial problems. You ever worry that it's going to be harder for us to get on the radar and get the attention that we might need?
I don't worry at all about being pushed aside. I can speak to the relationship that I have with the Prime Minister. We chat on a regular basis. I met him just a few weeks ago. He understands the situation of Newfoundland and Labrador. So does Minister Morneau. So I'm not worried about being pushed aside by anyone here. He's made an unwavering commitment to rate mitigation, to work with us to find a solution to that. We've put in investment in Newfoundland and Labrador, working with the federal government that we have not seen like any other federal government in a long, long time. So I'm not at all concerned about that relationship at all. It's strong, and you'll still continue to see for a long time federal investment in our province.
So just two more questions. Another policy issue. A unique challenge for our province is a shrinking population, right? We're all getting older, unfortunately, and the birth rate is not making up for the difference, and neither is immigration. When can politicians and the brainiacs at MUN and in other academic institutions and people who are engaged, when can we actually get together and deal with, I think that is actually the most serious problem we face. We're dying.
Yeah. You know what? I agree with your assessment of population is a big issue that we need to grapple with. The immigration plan that we put in place, through the way forward in 2016, we're ahead of plan on that.
But isn't it incremental, though, in terms of what we really need?
Oh, yeah. It's we are not bringing enough immigrants, and I still face questions from people around the province about bringing in immigrants in a general sense. But we need that. We need to increase the population, as you just mentioned. And keep in mind, the population problem that we have in Newfoundland and Labrador started with the collapse of the cod fishery in the early 90s. We have never recovered from that. We're the only province in the country right now would see a declining population.
It's interesting, if you go to Happy Valley Goose Bay, for instance, you'll see a thriving Filipino community, right? And my knowledge of the stats in the big land not the same as the island. Maybe Labrador is not in the same population crunch we are, but I wonder if it really doesn't take some bold initiatives to attract a lot of newcomers. Almost if you think back to when the Vietnamese War happened, and I think Ottawa accepted thousands of Vietnamese people, I think incremental thinking is not going to get us there. But maybe this is a discussion for another time.
Well, no, but from a population point of view, it is a discussion I think that is important because it can't be delayed. We've got to get our numbers up. We have young people, that are leaving the province. We have, because of the major projects that were done, we have young tradespeople that are looking for jobs. So I speak to these individuals a lot, and so what we've been able to do is make plans for what the future jobs would look like for our young people by retraining in some cases through CNA, university programs that are relevant to the labor sector that we need in the future. If you look at the technology sector, they're forecasting the need for some 4,500 jobs. The aerospace sector in our province right now can't get enough people in Newfoundland and Labrador to fill existing requirements. So we're seeing really almost polar opposites of some sectors versus some others. So we had to be able to get a message out. Retraining is an option for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians that want to be retrained to stay home here in our province. And plus, there are social programs that we must make sure that are there to support families when indeed they want to raise their families here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Final question for you. Obviously, 2020 is going to be big. We're going to get the Muskrat Falls report. We're going to have a budget in March, maybe an election. Who knows? will we actually see the cooperation that was talked about in the election in 2019? Because I think your message was, was a slightly more humble Dwight Ball, saying, okay, people have spoken, I managed to hang on. You chose me, you didn't want chess, but you gave me a message. Are we ever going to see this cooperation, or is that just kind of a mythical thing that people talk about?
The cooperation's got to come from all 40 members. I still want to work with all 40 members, just like I work with 13 premiers across this country, 10 provincial and 3 territorial. We've got a great working relationship from all parties nationally. I want to see that here in Newfoundland and Labrador as well. But it takes all 40 members to develop that cooperation. And right now we're not there, but as leader of this province, my door is always open to either whoever the leader is, from the other opposition parties, whoever the members are. That is the way. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians tell me every day, we want to be the focus. Their concerns as to be the focus for us, for me as leader of the province. I want to work with those opposition parties. I want to work with all 40 members. We can do this when we put our focus on Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
Well, Premier Ball, you've been very generous with your time, as you always are. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you and your family, and to all your viewers at CBC.
And to you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you.